Alrighty, so today we are going to do the season preview of Austin FC, and as I mentioned in the Moving Forward series episode, Los Verdes was definitely one of the most surprising team last season. And when you come off with such a surprising season and just a season where nobody expected Austin was going to make it all the way to the Western Conference Final, it's definitely going to be difficult trying to follow up in the very next season. But at the same time, when you look at this roster that Austin has, there's a chance that they can definitely once again make it back to the playoffs and have a chance to be an MLS Cup contender, especially in terms of some of the pieces that they have added this offseason. Now, last season, they finished with a 16-8-10 record and finished with 56 points. And in the last two seasons, in terms of last season, as I mentioned, 16-8-10 and finished with 56 points and finished second in the Western Conference, but there was just one game short of making the MLS Cup, losing in the Western Conference Final against LAFC, which I mentioned before. That was probably the worst game that Austin had played in the whole season, and that, yeah, it's probably not a great feeling to have your worst game of the season to be in the Western Conference Final. And then in their expansion season, 9-4-21 and finished with 31 points. They finished 12th in the Western Conference, which means they obviously did not make it to the playoffs. But obviously, as an expansion team, you're not always going to come up flying unless if you're the likes of Atlanta United and LAFC, or in some extent maybe Nashville SC in some way. And that, I think coming out of that first year, the main positive has to be what happened in the second half of the season when they kind of find an identity and find some strive that this team could be decent. And it turns out that definitely was the case heading into that 2022 season. Now, as I mentioned, in terms of the acquisition that they made in the offseason, they added a lot of pieces. They added a Finnish center back in Leo Vasanen. He's going to be a guy that is going to replace the other fellow Scandinavian center back and the Norwegian center back in Ruben Gabrielsen that is no longer with this team. They also add some more depth too with bringing Adam Lundqvist in the fullback position. And then probably the most impressive signing that they've done this off season is getting Los Verdes from the Colorado Rapids. And I really like this signing in a way where, I feel like for this Austin team, as much as obviously the attack is definitely the strength of this team, they still do kind of missing that crucial number 9 that can score the goals for this team. I mean, there's times where Maxi Urruti was able to do that in the early part of the season, but as I said before, Maxi Urruti throughout his career, or at least for most of his career in MLS, he's been a guy that always tends to start off hot in a season, and then he just go through a dry spell where he doesn't score again, and it kind of shown in last season. And also, Musa Gite, as much as there's definitely a lot of potential in this, and I still believe he definitely has some raw potential to be a 10-plus goal scored in this league, even though I think that might be crazy to say for some people, even to Austin FC. And he's still a guy that I think is more used for a depth pieces, and a guy that is perfectly could be used in terms of coming off the bench, especially with the speed that he brings to this Austin FC team. But they just really still haven't had that number 9 that can really put some fear in the opposition mind. And while Los Verdes has not been the same as what we've seen during his time with the Columbus Crew, he's still a guy that is a serviceable number 9, and he's still a guy that can bang the ball into back of net. I mean, during his limited time with the Colorado Rapids, he was able to score 8 goals, and we're looking very productive. And then I even mentioned I was kind of surprised the Rapids decided to not bring him back, consider how productive that he's been. And obviously we know during his time with Columbus of how productive he is, and now the fact that he's going to get service from the likes of Fagundes and Driussi, he's definitely going to have a fun time being part of this Austin FC attack. But then you also got more depth in Alfonso Ocampo Chavez, who's looking to try to get more minutes after pretty much getting none with the Seattle Sounders. Amrel Tarek, a guy that certainly is familiar to some MLS fans, used to play for the New York Red Bulls. Matt Brizano, longtime Quakes backup goalkeeper. Kind of sad the fact that with Matt Brizano, as much as he hasn't really been a starting goalkeeper for the Quakes, or haven't got the chance to do so, you'll always remember as a cult hero, especially of that shootout win that he had against the Seattle Sounders last year in the U.S. Open Cup. And then, of course, you added more depth in Sofiane Jofer coming from DC United. And it's definitely a direct replacement for Felipe Martins that they lost this offseason. Speaking of players that they lost this offseason, they lost Jared Stroud to St. Louis City FC, while Felipe Martins, of course, they move on from him, and Orlando City picked him up off a free agency. They also move on from their backup goalkeeper. It's kind of interesting the fact that they replace a backup goalkeeper with another backup goalkeeper, and both of those guys used to play for the San Jose Earthquakes. Like they replaced with Brazano to Tarbell, two former Quakes player, and two players that were backup for the Quakes, or at least in the case of Tarbell, he did start it for some times for the Quakes until we realized that he was pretty much a below average goalkeeper, and he was in favorite for JT Markowski, or at least at that time it was in favor for Daniel Vega. Then you got Thomas Pochettino, no longer with this team, and it's kind of sad to see that Pochettino just never really kind of worked out for him. I mean, a lot of people have talked about when he came to Austin and how he could maybe be the next Diego Valeri. And, again, there's definitely times where I saw some flashes of brilliance and he can be a decent number 10 in this team, but because of the fact that they found a a decent number 10 in Driussi there, I just had a feeling they were not going to bring back Pochettino, and exactly that is the case. And as I mentioned, Ruben Gabrielsen moving on with this team going back to Norway, followed by Danny Houston and Washington Caruso, a guy that, again, when they bought Washington Caruso to this team, I thought that's a good depth kind of signing, but he didn't really play a lot of minutes and really didn't get as much minutes as I thought he would be, which is kind of interesting to see. Now, in terms of the strength of this Austin team, it's definitely on the attack. I mean, this team has definitely one of the scariest attack in the league. When you look at this front four, you got Zardes up front, and on the wing area, you got Fagundes and Rigoni need there in the wing. And then, of course, in the number 10 position, who can not forget about Sebastian Driussi, one of the best number 10 and easily the top 3 number 10 in this league. A guy that can not only score the goals, but also assist the goal, and just a perfect playmaker that Austin was able to land on last season. And even going into the midfield, and let's not forget about Alex Ring, a guy that, for a long time, there is a reason why Alex Ring is considered one of the best number 6 and one of the best holding midfielder that can also provide something on the attacking end, though mostly now that because the attack is just so good, I think Ring has kind of played more of a defensive role, where he's basically playing in that Diego Chara kind of role, locking down in that midfield and doing the dirty work, and basically even trying to protect a back line that, last season there was time that there was question about this Austin FC back line, which I think that maybe brings into the weakness the fact that, I think there really isn't a lot of weakness. I mean, it's easy to point the defense as being a weakness, but, they added some pieces, and again, getting Leo Vasanen to replace Ruben Gabrielsen, and from what I heard, that Vasanen is definitely having a similar quality of what Gabrielsen brought to the table. I think they're going to be good in the defensive area, but obviously one of the big question is going to be in terms of the depth, especially in the back line, where I think in terms of the center back position, I mean, I know they're pretty much too deep in both of the center back position, but it wouldn't hurt if they could potentially get a fifth option, and especially I think right back might be another area that they might look in, because they're so loaded in the left back position right now that I was kind of surprised that they didn't really look into the other their fullback position, and that is unless if maybe they're planning to put some of those fullbacks that they have in the depth chart and basically put them out of position and play in the right back position, which we have seen that before, that teams have done that, but it's definitely not an ideal solution compared to just decided to maybe add depth in the fullback position instead of just maybe pulling a left back and convert him to a right back on your team. Now, in terms of the three big question coming into the season, obviously the biggest question right now for Austin FC has to surround the whole Claudio Reyna situation. So we talked about yesterday that, it's kind of unfortunate that, with all the fiasco that's going on with the U.S. Soccer Federation and the whole drama between Claudio Reyna and really the Reyna family and Greg Berhalter and the U.S. Soccer Federation, that you knew that Claudio Reyna, who's in one of the key centerpiece of this fiasco that's going going on between his family and the U.S. Soccer Federation and Greg Berhalter, that it seems like he's going to face some repercussion. And the repercussion is that he is forced to resign as the sporting director. Now, he is still with the club, and he's actually just a technical assistant right now, so he kind of demoted himself, or at least he's pretty much forced to demote himself. As I mentioned yesterday, Anthony Preco basically ordered that, yeah, if Reyna wants to stay with this team, he has to demote himself, because otherwise, I think there was no, Preco has no choice but to fire him because of the situation that unfortunately Claudio Reyna has really caught himself in all of the whole drama that I've been talking about. So there's that question of who exactly is going to replace him as a sporting director. And during the time with Claudio Reyna being the sporting director with Austin FC, it's been very good. Like I think it's been why that Austin decided to get him from NYCFC, and that Claudio Reyna definitely built some good things with a good decent squad with NYCFC, and we're starting to see the same thing for Los Verdes. And that again, it's going to be a bit of a loss, but we'll see who exactly is going to be coming into that role. And then will Rigoni have a bounce back season and avoid being kind of a bust? I think that is something that is a big question heading into this year, because I think last season it's pretty much safe to say that Rigoni definitely had a very underwhelming first season for Austin FC, and I don't really want to say that he's going to be a bust straight away, because usually when we see new players, especially kind of players that you pay a lot of money and label them as a DP player, it's easy to say that they're a bust if they're not playing very well, when that maybe is a case where a new player coming to a new country, they're not familiar with the league and not familiar with the country, and especially not familiar with the system that Austin FC basically runs, and that's why he gets off to a slow start. But there's no doubt that this season you would think that he has to bounce back, because again, this would not be a good look for Austin to be getting a guy that was supposed to noted as one of the best attacking talent coming down in Argentina, and it feels like he could maybe join the numerous list of Argentine flop that we have seen on the attacking end in MLS in recent season. I mean, I'm pretty sure Atlanta United fans can name some of them, because they had a couple of those Argentine players that they label him as big money DP kind of signing, and they didn't turn out to be well whatsoever. And then lastly, I think there's definitely that question of the depth of this team. So before I talk about how, I don't think this team has the problem in terms of depth issue, because they're pretty much too deep in every single position. But the big question is that depth actually decent? Because it's one thing to have depth in your team, but it's another of the fact that if you do lose some of your starters either to injuries or to international duty, and you put in those depth pieces, how much quality you're going to lose. And we've seen the best team usually will have some depth guys that can come in straight away, and there won't be too much of a drop-off in terms of quality. And I just can't say that maybe be certain for Austin FC. Consider last season, they pretty much played their same starting 11 for most of the game, and that a lot of that has to do with the fact that they were one of the teams that were very lucky in terms of not dealing with major back-breaking injury that really create problems for this team. But in the case that if they are going to face some injury issue this season, especially losing maybe some of their key pieces, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if those players on the depth chart will step in. And when you look at most of the pieces that they have in the depth chart, yeah, it is questionable. It is definitely very, very questionable whether or not if they do have some good depth, and that again we'll see or find out when exactly if they are going to be forced to basically playing some of the bench guys. And in some way we'll definitely figure that that's going to happen because of how the season is with them being in CCL, and that there are going to be some games that they're going to have to use some of their depth pieces to play play those guys in some of these games, so they can rest some starters for some more important competition like the CONCACAF Champions League. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see as the season goes along. And then of course a bonus kind of big question, because I did a bonus kind of big question in my first season preview with Atlanta United, is not the first bonus fact, I meant the one that I did for St. Louis City. I don't know if I did a bonus kind of big question for Atlanta United too, but definitely the bonus big question for this team is, can they stop shooting themselves in the foot and go get off to a slow start. I mean, I'm pretty sure that is one thing that Josh Wolf is definitely preaching to this team in this offseason, where they just cannot afford to keep shooting themselves in the foot and getting off to a slow start. I mean, last season, it is just remarkable how crazy that they were able to show that resilient and tenacity to come back game in and game out. But I'm pretty sure Josh Wolf deeply wants the team to not get into that habit, and that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to see with this team heading into this year. But either way, I expect this team should be a competitive team. But yeah, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this season preview? If you're an Austin FC fan, what do you think is the expectation for this season, and your prediction of where exactly they're going to finish in the table? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.